This RT News Hour, we hear eyewitness accounts of the recent massacre near Aleppo in Syria when a suicide attacker targeted buses carrying evacuees, killing dozens of children. Some of them say militants were luring children with food.
Just before the explosion, a strange car got through the militants' checkpoint. They said they were bringing snacks for the children. Then they got out of the car and started shouting, "Who has children? Bring your children here."
It comes as Britain's Foreign Secretary says it would be hard to refuse the US if asked to actively support its military action in Syria against the Assad government.
In future, were it to be a reasonable request in pursuit of similar objectives, then I think it would be very difficult for the United Kingdom to say no.
UK MPs are set to vote on the Prime Minister's decision to hold a snap election in June as opposition parties look to counter Theresa May to make their own gains in Parliament. And America calls on the UN Security Council to take action to protect human rights, while a rights group questions the initiative, saying Washington fails to address the abuses committed by its own allies. Live from Moscow to the world, this is RT International. My name's Ewan O'Neill. Welcome to the programme. Witnesses have been describing Saturday's massacre in Aleppo province when a blast hit buses with evacuees trying to leave areas besieged by rebels.
حالة ذعر وحالة خوف والله إن شاء الله ما بتنذكر ما بتنعاد.
اليوم كمان الله يحميهم شبابنا اللي كانوا معنا الله يحميهم لو ما بحثوا معنا على اولادنا وجمعونا
معنا بالتفجير هذا كان معنا بالتفجير وزم
في عيال مخفيه ما عم نعرفها وين من ضمنهم سنفتي اللي معها صبي وبنت.
Well, the suicide bombing reportedly killed more than 100 people. Many of the victims were children. Journalist Vanessa Beeley, who sent RT exclusive video from the scene, also spoke to a driver of one of the buses.
Just before the explosion, a strange car got through the militants' checkpoint. They said they were bringing snacks for the children. Then they got out of the car and started shouting, "Who has children? Bring your children here." The kids have been under siege for so long, they hadn't seen biscuits or crisps. They played on their emotions. People had been stuck on buses for 48 hours. The rebels didn't let us out. And in that time, we were only given 12 loaves of bread for everyone. So when the car came with food, everybody rushed to it. There were Ahrar al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra, and some factions from the Free Syrian Army. When the blast rocked the area, people rushed away into the woods. But militants surrounded them and brought them back to the buses.
Britain could join America in bringing military action against the Assad government in Syria. That's according to the latest statement by UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. He said it will be hard to say no if Washington requests support for its strikes in the country.
And as I said, we were not asked for specific support, but it is my belief, though I stress no such decision has yet been taken, it is my belief that were such a request to be made in future, were it to be a reasonable request in pursuit of similar objectives, then I think it would be very difficult for the United Kingdom to say no.
Well, the Foreign Secretary's comments seem to indicate a departure from the UK's previous policy on Syria in 2013. Parliament voted against military intervention in the country, crushing then Prime Minister David Cameron's ambitions. And now there is growing concern among the British public that lawmakers will once again be asked to approve military involvement. Isa Ali is across the story for us in London.
Quite a stunning statement from the UK's Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, stating that should the US ask for the UK's assistance in bombing Syrian government forces in the future, that it would be difficult to say no. Mr. Johnson also expressed his full support for those US airstrikes, saying that they sent an emphatic message to the Syrian government and to President Assad, what he described as President Assad's so-called barbarism. And he also went on to say that those strikes could possibly lead to a political solution, a very mafia-esque way, perhaps, of trying to seek a political solution. We'll bomb you, and then we'll bring you to the negotiating table. Mr. Johnson also called for Russia to end what he called its blind support for the Syrian government. But it's interesting that over the weekend there was that devastating attack on civilians which saw dozens of children brutally killed. We saw those images, very shocking scenes over the weekend, and yet no condemnation from the British government or the American government of the perpetrators of that attack, thought to be those extremist rebel groups. So leading many to ask why the double standard by the British government. This isn't the first time that the UK have supported US military action. We saw that in Libya and more notoriously in Iraq. But with regards to Syria, just a few years ago, the Conservative coalition government tried to pass that vote to bomb Syrian government forces, and that was rejected by Parliament. And yet Mr. Johnson suggesting that he may approve such airstrikes without the approval of Parliament. And of course, we have elections coming up in the UK, and the Houses of Lords and Commons are due to be dissolved, so there may be no one for the government to ask approval from anyway.
Well, Boris Johnson's comments come as the US faces growing criticism over its campaign in Syria. Human Rights Watch issued a damning report accusing the US of failing to take adequate precautions to spare civilian lives in its operations in the country. The organization says innocent people have paid the price for Washington's mistakes, referring to a strike that took place on the 16th of March. According to data obtained by Human Rights Watch, 38 people were killed in the US air raid which hit a mosque. The strike took place as worshippers were gathering for evening prayers. A deputy director for Human Rights Watch told RT that US officials overlooked key information on the ground.
The U.S. government appears to have failed to understand some very key aspects of the target that they hit. Our investigation, through speaking with witnesses on the ground, through looking at video and photographic evidence, we were able to confirm, in fact, that the building that was struck was a mosque. The airstrike took place in between the sunset and the evening prayer, at a time when U.S. officials should have known that there would be people gathering in the mosque. We do not believe that the government, U.S. government, has taken adequate precautions in conducting this strike. We are encouraged by the fact that they have said that they will launch an investigation, but that investigation needs to have results that are public and transparent. If in fact this was an unlawful strike, it is important that the civilians that were injured are compensated adequately, and that those that are responsible are held accountable.
Well, the Pentagon denied its planes had hit the mosque, stating they targeted another building just 15 meters away, where al-Qaeda members were reportedly meeting. U.S. officials also stated that no damage was done to the mosque itself. However, after Human Rights Watch submitted its report to U.S. Central Command, Washington promised to, quote, carefully review the incident. Well, on that, political analyst Lou Rockwell says investigations conducted by Washington into its own strikes are fiction.
It's like all these investigations by American police of themselves, of the government of itself. They'll say, well, we investigated ourselves and it turns out we're not guilty. Oh, okay. Thanks very much for letting us know. The unstated principle of the American media and of the American government is anybody killed by the U.S. deserved it. Either they were, the best thing you could say, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. How dare they have been in that wedding party that could so be easily mistaken by a drone for a group of al-Qaeda soldiers of plotting. So they don't think there's anything where anybody who was killed. Don't worry about it. If it may be a PR problem for them, then they worry. If it's not a PR problem, and the U.S. media always make sure, to the extent they can, it is never a PR problem for the U.S. government to kill civilians.
Well, we talked about the impact of the Syrian war on children with Malene Jensen from UNICEF.
What we have seen over the past 6 years, and let's remember this is 6 years into a very bloody conflict, children have again and again been targeted by attacks. UNICEF was very quick at coming out to condemn this most latest incident. And again, our message is that this should not only break our hearts, this should really bring our resolves even stronger and make us angry to the point where we demand an end to what is happening. Children again and again are paying the highest price for a conflict that is not of their making, and it has to stop. No one knows, and just when you think it cannot get worse for children inside Syria, it gets worse for the children. I don't think anyone can look at those images and not just be horrified about what we're doing to children inside that country.
To another of the day's big stories, UK MPs will vote later on Wednesday on the Prime Minister's announcement to hold an early general election on June the 8th. Defending her decision, Theresa May said she was seeking to unite the country in the face of the Brexit process. But opponents have slammed her for being opportunistic, putting party before country. RT's Paula Sleer has more from London.
Ms May, Home Secretary.
Theresa May wants more power.
At this moment of enormous national significance, there should be unity here in Westminster. But instead, there is division.
And polls suggest this is her time. Around half of the public prefer keeping Theresa May as Prime Minister, while opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn languishes behind with 14%. Even so, he says he's ready.
I welcome the opportunity for us to put the case to the people of Britain, to stand up against this government and its failed economic agenda.
But leading the polls is no guarantee of victory. One of May's key rivals thinks her move's a miscalculation.
In Scotland, we have strong voices against the direction that a Tory government wants to take, voices that will stand up for Scotland, that will stand up for our values.
Theresa May might have set her sights on crushing Labour, but she's got Scottish nationalist seats in her sights too.
I think what it means for SNP is another opportunity for the Scottish National Party to stand up for the people of Scotland and say enough is enough. We do not want our economy driven off a cliff edge, and we do not want our economy destroyed.
The Prime Minister wants a bigger Westminster power base to get parliamentary unity as Britain leaves the EU. But even the Brexit standard bearers, the UK Independence Party, sense a chance to rock May's boat.
It's an opportunity for the United Kingdom Independence Party to be standing in those areas where they were very strong and actually to see what we can do there. So we'll be putting up some strong resistance as well, so it won't necessarily be all her own way for sure.
If all goes to plan, British voters will be back at the polls in 7 weeks. And while May is banking on riding the poll wave to silence the Remainers, half the country sees this general election as the Brexit referendum rerun they always wanted. Paula Sleer, RT, London.
We got a lot of reaction on this, including from a British political analyst who says Theresa May could have a turbulent time ahead over the next 2 months.
It is a big moment of decision because it puts everybody on the spot, and I think Theresa May, in a sense, has got two problems here. She's got the problem she mentioned, which is that the opposition parties, and particularly in the House of Lords, a number of even Conservative peers, could cause a lot of trouble to any legislation she wants to get through to prepare for Brexit. But she also has a slim majority, so the 40 or so Conservative MPs who are absolutely committed to a really harsh break with Brussels have a huge sway because of a small majority. Nicola Sturgeon may say, well, if you're going to rerun the referendum in England, we'll rerun it in Scotland, and we would hope to get a lion's share of the 60% or so of Scots who voted to stay in the EU.
The UN Security Council discusses the issue of human rights with very different approaches from member states. More on that coming away after a short break.